Welcome back, everybody. This is Time to Lean with Laura Danger and Crystal Britt. We are here to have you air out your dirty laundry, and we're going to help you clean up your shit best we can. Today, we have a listener, viewer, follower. We have a question.
We
How are you,
do. We have
Crystal?
a question pulled from our DMs. I am good. The weather in Southern California is throwing me, so I'm constantly feeling just a little bit disoriented and like I haven't quite woke up, and that doesn't work when I don't feel woken up until like 3 p.m. when the sun comes out for a half hour. How
Yeah,
are you?
yikes. Good. I'm really curious what today's question is because I know we've had a couple of really, they're all good, but I want to say people have been like hard hitting lately with a lot of the questions we get frequently. So I
Totally.
am ready to chat about it.
Amazing. Okay, so this listener says, my husband and I are just starting to implement Fair Play and have decided to break up the cleaning card into areas. Then we took turns picking areas. He thinks what we ended up with is unfair because the amount of estimated hours to complete aren't equal. And then in parentheses, he's a numbers guy and has twice as many hours just on cleaning. I'm having a difficult time getting him to understand that it's not about splitting 50-50, but making sure that it's not 90-10 to one person either. I'm also trying to convey that after being 90% card holder for 20 years, I am burnt out. And now that we no longer have kids at home and he is retired, I feel it is completely reasonable for him to take a larger piece of the pie. Would love to hear this addressed on the podcast. There are like three parts to that question. Laura, where do you
Yeah.
want to dive in?
Okay. First, I want to ask a question because I think this is going to inform. I know we can't ask them, but am I to assume that she is still working?
That is a good question. Let me see. Let me look and see if there's any indicator in here. She actually, that's so interesting that you asked if she was still working because I assumed that she was mostly stay at home. So I feel like it could go either way. She doesn't specify here if it's a combination or if she's working outside of the home.
Okay. Yeah, from what I picked up from that, it sounds like to me, I'm imagining that they both have been working and she has
Mhm.
been shouldering the majority of the responsibilities. And now it sounds like she's still working. He has retired, is upset that now he's probably doing like 14 hours a week of housework and management. That's actually a really ridiculous. No, she's probably doing like 7 hours a week of this.
Mm-hmm.
And she now has shrunk how much she's had to do and has gotten to focus on a couple hours a week of that and more so still doing stuff. That's how I picture
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
based on my experience. What were you thinking though if she was stay at home?
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, similar, right? Like the only thing that changes in that dynamic for me is the idea that he's taking over things that he's never done, maybe, or that she's never felt like she could relinquish because he didn't have the free time, right?
Mhm.
And so he's coming into that role. Sounds like he's willing to participate in that. What
Yep.
I thought was really interesting was that they took turns picking areas. First of all, we got to talk about the cleaning card because I have heard this multiple times in sessions with my clients. I'm sure you have as well, where the couple will look at the cleaning card and they're like, so cleaning, just like one person has that card, right?
Mhm.
And in our household, we separate like cleaning. We have our house cleaned twice a month, and that's like a deep clean. But the cleaning card is to communicate and make sure that like those folks are paid, that they are compensated well, that they are tipped, all of those things. The tidying and organizing card is the one for like, hey, if there's pee on the floor of the bathroom, that's that card holder, right? The tidying up
Okay.
and organizing. That's how we separate it in our home. Because the deep cleaning stuff in this season of life, like during the summer, we're focusing on different areas to teach the kids, building on those life skills and all of those things. But the cleaning card as a whole feels very fucking overwhelming of like, hey, if we have three children, even if they're out of the home, right? Like maintaining the cleanliness of a home, there like can be a lot of pressure or feel like a task that's too big. So how do you feel about splitting it?
We handle this a couple of different ways in our household. we have tried it where one of us is primarily responsible for it. And in that case, it's leading the charge. So that was me for a long time.
Yep.
And because I work from home, what I liked that because on downtime, or if I just like needed a physical break to put headphones on and do something, I would grab the vacuum or I dust something that needed to be dusted. And so I basically I didn't have to communicate to anybody as I got things done. And I took the mental note, like, oh, I cleaned the toilets because I had 15 minutes here and there or whatever. And that was fine for a while. But then on the weekends, the family would be sitting around and we wanted to do kind of like a Sunday clean on the weekends where I would be in charge and I'd be like, okay, everybody, let's get up and like, let's do it. I started to feel really burdened by it's like that naggy feeling, right? I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah. You're breaking up the
interrupting
fun
everybody's
to, yeah.
day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that felt really crappy. And we ended up, now we switch, like we sit down and we have a fair play conversation about, actually, hey, everybody, I've got a freebie on my website. You can
Mm-hmm.
go
Oh,
and
absolutely.
download.
Straight
It's a
plug. Absolutely.
checklist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what do you need to do? And it's general, of course. Like, what do you need to do daily, weekly, monthly, yearly? It's a list, it's a checklist of stuff that needs to happen. And now we basically decide ahead of time who's going to do what. And it's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, break. And like for 20 minutes, our house is not that big. We have the things we do. We vacuum. We have a certain schedule of cleaning the floors. We do the toilets, the bath, the kitchen. We kind of clean as we go, but that's
Mm-hmm.
part of it is teaching the kids how to do it. We don't hand
Yeah.
off the tasks to the kids, but we teach them about how to keep your bedroom clean, why.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an ongoing thing. But in my opinion, and what I tell my clients is that it's like one of the heaviest hitters. It's like that in
Yeah.
meals.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You have to be committed to open communication about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about fair play is when you first start it, you can be really rigid and you can be like, you know what? I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
You see what it's like to be
Mm-hmm.
constantly responsible for the hygiene, the cleanliness of our home.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
then you
For
know
the
what?
upkeep that it
Then let's
takes.
come. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's
Mm-hmm.
revisit.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I do like that. I do like the rigidity that Fair Play provides in terms of owning the full task because for some couples, like they don't, for the non-caregiving partner who hasn't been the default, they don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know. And
Mhm.
dealing those Fair Play cards to owning that task to completion is the fastest trial by fire to like, you're going to learn really quickly, like what it takes, right? To be able to maintain that. Um, the other thing, like I really resonate with the concept of one partner having a hard time understanding the numbers part of it, like the logic, like, well, this doesn't, this isn't fair because statistically, or, whatever. I'm not a numbers person clearly, but like laying it out numbers wise, this doesn't make any sense to me. This doesn't feel like that is, I feel like as valid as being like, this doesn't feel right to me, right? Um, and I think that at first it's not going to, because these are tasks that you have not ever done before. They're going to take you twice as long, maybe, right? As you're learning how to do them, as you're learning how to complete them, you're practicing, you're learning. That study that I think we referenced in a couple of episodes, but that study that you and I found where it talked about the relationship satisfaction from in cishet relationships from a woman, reported satisfaction is higher when the communication and the emotional involvement from the male partner is higher, the relationship satisfaction is higher. So I do
Mhm.
feel like it's okay if the person who is the card holder, like in this situation, her husband, if he says to her, hey, I'm feeling really overwhelmed because I have never been in charge of meals before, or whatever. We're talking about cleaning. So I've never been in charge of like, keeping the kitchen clean. This feels like a lot of hours or a lot of things. Can you help me like figure out how to break down tasks or like can we talk more about the minimum standard of care, or right, like it's the communication piece that I feel like would be more, that maybe she would feel more inclined to have a conversation about, as opposed to these numbers aren't fair and this doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because if she's been the 90% card holder for 20 years and now he's got free time, like I would be like, too bad, so sad. Like that sounds rough for you that this is, taking up a lot of your time. It's because you've never done it before. As opposed to
Yeah.
my partner coming to me and saying like, "Hey, can you help me with this? Like I'm really struggling. I'm struggling to figure out not to put it back on the default caregiver, right? But to say like, "Hey, can we have a conversation about how I've never done this before and how like do you have a more efficient way of doing this? Because I don't know why this is taking me so long."
Yeah. That study was really interesting. And isn't it the Gottman Institute, or it's John Gottman says it, but when husbands can be influenced by their wives, like that's a word
Hmm.
he used.
Yeah.
It's,
Hmm.
I mean, and I take the gender out of it. If you are open
Yeah. If
essentially
you're
to
open,
your partner.
yep, to being influenced by your partner, the relationship satisfaction goes way up. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say something that, I mean, we're getting into the territory of sort of why we say fair play's a tool,
Hmm.
not necessarily, it's not going to solve those issues of communication. It's a great framework
Hmm.
for and language.
Yes.
But if you are getting to that and you're like, okay, now I'm doing all of these chores that I've never done before, you have the option to either go, oh, well, I'm just not going to like, I'm going to throw the standard out the window. Like, screw
Hmm.
this. I don't have enough time or energy. I'm just going to leave the stuff out. Like,
Hmm.
you can do that. Or like you said, you can ask for help. You can say, hey, you seem to do this in like half the time. Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah,
Is
and even approaching it from from like, again, being open to being influenced by your partner, like starting with acknowledging, right? I have not been the default caregiver of this household and we're changing things up. So acknowledging, I know that you have done this for 20 years and I know that I have not participated. And then expressing a need. I'm struggling with this, and then asking for help, right? Do you have the emotional capacity? Would you be willing to sit down with me to help me develop a framework, or help give me pointers to how you are able to cut this down to half the time? Because I feel like I'm floundering, and then talking about what feelings are you experiencing? I like when Ben has a task, I'll tell you, when he goes to, if it's my turn to order meals, or like, if it's my meal, always order. I will never cook. And I will text him and be like, "Hey, what do the kids get from Chipotle?" Because I will never remember. Because since the kids were little, it was like, I'm not putting another fucking piece of information into my brain. So
Mhm,
you got to do that. So he has done that since the kids were little. I don't know what they get anywhere. So I
mhm.
have to text him, and it's very humbling, right? To say I can't say you don't do anything, or, it's hard for me to be resentful when I have to text him and be like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I don't have this information and I should have this on a note in my phone. Could you tell me? Would you help me?" Right? That's very, very different.
Okay, let's approach that. If you were to text him all of the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
consistently, it's his responsibility to communicate to you, hey, you know, I sometimes feel
Mm-hmm.
frustrated about the reminders. He also has the opportunity to set a boundary there, to express
Yep.
his feelings and needs. And he can say, oh, you could also say, oh, you know what? I didn't realize I was doing that. Like I said, I
Yep.
should have a note. Could you sit down with me tonight after the kids are in bed? Let's come up with a document and put
Mm-hmm.
all the information there. I will never text you again. Next time I do, just tell me to look at the document.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
And I will,
all good faith. Like, you have to be
yes.
open.
And what's so interesting, and like this could be for another episode, but what's really interesting is as we've moved from away from complementarianism into egalitarianism into like actual equitable partnership, I'm gonna tell you, like, everybody lean in close because I'm never gonna repeat this. It has been very, very easy for me in these kinds of instances to be like, Well, what's the big deal? If I text him every time I go, you know what I mean? Like I can see it from the other side now of like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't need to commit that to memory. Why would I need to do that? He just gives me the information freely. Right. So you're exactly right in that it is my responsibility to take the extra step to figure out how to keep that from happening. And is also part of his, right? Exactly like you said, he can set that boundary and say, listen, I'm not, he could tell me when I'm in line at Chipotle, like we've had this conversation before, I'm going to go ahead and set the boundary in a very kind way that I'm not going to give you that information. And then I'm either going to need to make a couple of decisions and have to hear the kids complain about I didn't order what they wanted, or but I'm going to feel that consequence because it was my job to own that task and to have that work done ahead of time. It was not on him to do that. You're exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, it's really interesting to be on the other side of it. And this is the work, this is the personal work when you're somebody who has internalized the idea that it's your role to anticipate needs.
Mm-hmm.
I because I want to anticipate other people's needs, I don't necessarily think that I should have to communicate mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yep.
the work is not only setting a boundary. To me, that came first.
Yeah.
To me, it's I'm going to set a boundary around my time. I'm going to learn how to say that feels bad. I don't like that. And then I have to I have to be encouraging of him expressing his needs. I have to not try to over anticipate. It's like a multifaceted shift that
Yep.
has to happen, which is why personal therapy, reflection, a shout out to Rose Hackman's Emotional Labor and boundaries, and Nedra Tawab Glover's How to Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All those books of like, it's nice to notice and anticipate needs and things like that, but also you need to both be asking for what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clear communication is kind. And having that, like the other thing that I wanted to touch on with this couple as well is the idea of like, how do you explain to clients what's equitable may not feel equal? Or like the feeling, because I know I have one way of explaining it to my clients when we talk about equity.
I'm so curious if you have a very clear or concise version of this, but I just had a client ask about golf. Like,
Mm,
hey, if my partner is having a 6, 7 hour stretch of personal time once a week, plus playing in the middle of the week, do I also get like 12 hours a week to do whatever I want? Should I be
mm,
aiming for that?
mm,
And what I said was, I usually encourage looking at, personal strengths and the way that certain tasks feel.
mm-hmm,
So I look at the quality of what is going on when I play golf. Well, it is a fully immersive experience.
mm-hmm,
There are boundaries around my time. So I feel truly free to get into the flow the entire
mm-hmm,
time I'm there. I don't have to answer my phone. I'm fully not responsible for anybody at that time. That is quality. Breaking up 12 hours into the week where you're just like, okay, I'm going to pop out. I got the baby for an hour. You go run.
right, right.
Totally different experience and not
Yes.
quality.
Mm-hmm,
So maybe you trade. Maybe someone takes a 5-day trip
right,
twice a year.
right.
So if you, and like everybody loves, I don't know, me, I love to mow the lawn. I'm not
Mm-hmm,
responsible for kids. I'm not, again, I can be outside in the sun. If I'm spending 2 hours doing that, I'd rather do 2 hours of work doing that than
mm-hmm.
30 minutes of washing the dishes.
Yes. Yep.
So it's about fairness. It's about everybody having experiences like, hey, take over the cleaning for once.
Yes.
Try it.
Right. Right.
So it's like quality, I guess. I don't know. How do you explain it?
Yeah, I like that picture of because that's when I in my own personal therapy, right? Figuring out what a break means for me, right? For me does mean fully immersed, no interruptions, no, right? Because of my ADHD, the constant when I'm working from home, the like I will try and work. Like yesterday, I spent all day trying to work on a resource, but it was in fits and starts. So getting into those activities that are fully immersive for me, I have to have undivided attention to be able to dedicate to what I want to do. When we talk about tasks and what feels equitable versus what, what the hour breakdown is, right? We have to take into account, yeah, is this a new task? Is it going to take me twice as long to get used to doing, to learn a new skill, right? Because that's going to take extra time. But also, I talk to clients about what tasks feel heady and emotionally heavy, right? For me, the kids' health card, like I have health anxiety. So the kids' health card is very heavy to me. For Ben, it is not as heavy. He does not have health anxiety. So there are seasons, right? Like during cold and flu and, like with COVID, like during different seasons, he takes the kids' health card. I take it other seasons, right? Um, with cleaning, right? Or let's say dishes, right? If dishes, is an emotionally heavy thing for you for whatever reason, right? Reminds you hardcore of postpartum depression or what, you know what I mean? Like we all have ties to different things. That's okay to communicate to a partner of like, hey, that's when you sit down to deal at the beginning of the week. Hey, let's check our calendars. Well, that's the purpose. Also, one of the purposes of a meetup, right? And a redeal
Mhm.
is checking in and being like, okay, what does this week look like for you? Okay, it's heavy on work and you've got a big project due. Maybe you don't get assigned all of the very heavy cards that are a lot for you to handle. Maybe we redistribute some of those so that you have the energy to be able to meet that deadline or whatever it is, right? To be able to meet that need. So it's again plays to one of the fair play principles of you and me versus the task, right? As opposed to you and I versus each other. We're like, well, I have a lot of work too, right? It's like, okay, well, then maybe volunteering for the kids' school doesn't get dealt in that week, right? Call
Right.
the teacher and let them know. Then we both deal it out, right? That's okay. But working as a team to figure out, hey, I want to protect your emotional well-being, you want to protect my emotional well-being, and that's the communication component of we have enough good faith banked and built up, right? That's how trust works, right? So
Mhm.
having all of that, assuming that that's there, it's hard to try and figure out. It's hard to start that process of figuring out what feels equitable as opposed to, well, these number of hours are twice as many as yours. And it's like, well, they were 5 times as many for the 20 years. So,
Right. Yeah, and I was thinking about this video that I made kind of ages ago now, where someone was talking about how they were so overwhelmed and they were so done doing all of the things around the house and they were just begging their husband to do the dishes. And finally, he was like, "Fine, I'll do them." And he just bought paper plates and he like went out and got paper plates and she was like, "Well, at least I don't have to do the dishes anymore. Like I still have to do cups and silverware, but like I don't have to do the dishes anymore." And I responded back and I was like, I don't know what I said at the time. And there's such a lack of nuance in
yeah,
those quick videos, so I don't think it landed the way I wanted it to land. But I was like, that's not like you don't have to eat off of paper plates.
right.
And here's the piece of nuance that I want to add, because it is okay, absolutely, if that is, especially depending on where you have room in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
paper plates is what is going on right now, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. If I was in the takeout, I mean, I'm still in I just same. Takeout all the time. I'm not
Yeah.
going to cook. It's
Yeah.
fine. I'm going to find some places I like the food from, whatever. If that is okay for you, if that is your family's standard, if you have agreed to it, it meets the family's needs, you consider chronic illness, you consider
Mm-hmm.
capacity, big deadlines, whatever. If you have talked about those things
Mm-hmm.
and they meet
Mm-hmm.
your family's needs, that's fine. That was not what this woman was talking about. And
No.
in the whoever's writing us in, the person who's writing in, it is not okay, in my opinion, in the long run. If you're having a challenging time balancing it all, learning how to clean, it's taking forever. totally cool to be like, hey, let's like maybe take it a little slower. I don't want to lose your trust by doing a bad job out of the gates.
Mm,
Cool. Maybe lower the standard just for a little bit or cut a few things just for a little bit. That is not the end goal though.
mm-hmm,
Can't be
mm-hmm.
like forever. I am not gonna put the effort in to keep up
Yeah.
with our I'm not gonna meet our
This is just,
family
yeah, this is
standards.
just too much. This is too high of an expectation.
If you don't
Yeah.
like it, do it yourself.
Right.
That's what that's what that is. If you
Right.
don't like it my way, do it yourself. Is not
Yes.
that's not partnership.
That's not partnership. It's that same thing of like, well, my standards just aren't that high, right? Your standards higher than
Right.
mine. And it's like, okay. Like that's not you and me versus the task. That's, well, I don't give a shit about that. And I
Yeah,
also
what
am
would
not
you
open to
say?
learning from you.
What would you say to someone who comes to you and they're like, okay, well, I keep, I just want him, I want the dishes washed,
Mm-hmm.
maybe put away once a day. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's for me what my standard is. And my husband just keeps saying like he's fine grabbing them out of the dishwasher. Like what advice would you give me if that
The
was
thing is, I'm trying to think of all of the toxic things that I would do, like, because that's like laundry and shit. You know what I mean? It's like, well, then wear your clothes out of a dirty pile next, or out of a clean pile next to your bed. Um, what would, oh, okay. Okay. So so in that situation, what I would tell to a couple like that, like, well, her standards just like a lot higher than mine. I don't really care about it that much. What I would point out, even as a fair play facilitator, right? Because I kind of like ride this fine line always of like fair play facilitator and coach. And like it's not therapy, it's not couples therapy, right? But this is where I would ride that line very carefully and say, okay, but if we're going to take that perspective on it, because it is a perspective, it is a worldview now that you're holding to of like, well, this just isn't a priority for me and it is for her. So, like, if she wants to do it that way, then that's up to her. You are choosing to not participate. You are choosing to disengage from your partner who is also expressing a need, right? You're choosing to long term disengage from that conversation. And in terms of like Gottman method, right, and Gottman theory, that is a bid for connection is her even showing up to this meeting with you. She didn't have to try and, because if we're doing that, if we're approaching with that attitude, she probably was the one who contacted me for this meeting, right? So she's turning toward you. She wants to not only, it's not just about the domestic labor, which we would have already talked about in that session and covered. It's not just about that. It's about your relationship satisfaction between the two of you. And if you choose to have this perspective and hold this, this is a symptom of a bigger issue that is going to be a long-term problem, right? Of you're now communicating to her, I don't give a shit about how you feel. I don't care about how you feel. I don't care about your standard. Your comfort is not a priority to me,
right?
right?
It's
Or even
saying,
engaging in that conversation is not important to me. Deal with it.
right, my comfort, my needs, my priorities are more important than your comfort. That's what that says.
It's dismissive. It's
It's
dismissive.
very dismissive.
And that's the opposite of what the studies that you and I have talked about and looked at, which is when women in cishet relationships do not feel seen and do not feel heard and are not like emotionally engaged, they're done, right? Like that's the center of a relationship. And so he's choosing to not do that. So that's what I would say to that partner. Like, you can do that, but know that it seems like a very small piece right now to be like, well, I'm just going to get paper plates. It's okay if that's been a discussion, if that's been a communicate, like, hey, you know what I'm thinking is that this season in life, we've got 4 kids under 5. You know what? I'm just thinking for both of us, because that's the other thing too. In the example that you gave, she absolutely should not have been washing the cups. That partner should have been washing the cups still,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if he's buying paper plates, dope. Then you only have to wash 4 cups. But that's on that guy. That's not on her to take that on. But if it's not a discussion and he's just like, well, God, like, we're just not going to eat off of, plates because your standards are too high to want to eat off real plates. It's like, that's not okay. That's dismissive.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, I think I do get a lot of clients, a lot of people in DMs and comments who ask, okay, but he really genuinely, like, if they lived on their own, they would not fold their clothes.
Hmm.
They would do all sorts of things that I totally would hate. I wouldn't be able to handle. It'd be a
Right.
mess. It'd be gross, according to my standards. And they don't want to have a conversation or honor the types of standards that I'm setting. If your values are so misaligned, you're they are like, oh, it's hurting me so much that I have to give up 10 minutes to do this thing, is killing me. Okay, don't live that life. Like, opt out, man.
This is where we get soapboxy because I was like, it's because it's like, then one, don't be partnered. And
Right.
two, if you're like, well, I enjoy being partnered, no, you don't. You enjoy having a maid.
Yeah.
Like you enjoy having someone else have that standard and you enjoy company. So get a roommate. Like
Yeah.
live in a house with four other people who don't have standard, like have the same standard that you do for living, but you don't want a partner. That's not a partnership. That's a caretaking relationship.
Right. And that's the part, is like, okay, in this scenario, if the one partner who likes things maybe a little bit neater, a little bit cleaner, and the other partner's like, well, I would rather use my time sitting on the couch, playing video games, whatever. I want that so badly that I will totally dismiss you and your needs. And I will be totally fine with you working in our home 6 additional hours, 7 additional hours. That experience is fine to me. Even if you come to me and say that's not fine with you, even if you say it's really overwhelming and you don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
if he is saying I'm fully satisfied with that dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, that's not a partnership.
Mm-mm.
That's just putting your own needs and comfort first.
Mm-hmm.
To
Yeah.
opt the opt le- ugh.
We don't feel passionate about this at all.
I
Like,
mean, like, the nice way of saying that is, if your values are so misaligned, it is okay to see the household and the way that the household is running as a big issue. It is
yeah.
where you spend your time. It is how you put your time and energy. It's a huge portion of your life. The clothes you wear, the food you eat,
Mm-hmm.
the air, the space, and the way it smells and looks is like, I mean, I work from home. It's like 99% of my day,
Right.
but that's the life. Your life
Right.
is that.
That is your life. Right. It makes up the ambiance and the atmosphere of your life.
Right. If you want to live a shithole life, sorry, I'm judging this guy at this point, this imaginary guy.
This
Go live in a
imaginary
shithole somewhere else. Bye.
uh
But really, like, if that's not the life you want, then, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine.
yeah. Yeah, it's okay to not be partnered and to not have that dynamic, but it's not okay to put that on to the caregiving partner as like, well, your standards are just like really high, right? It's okay to have a conversation of like, again, it's the approach, right? It's very different to be like, well, your standards are too high. It's another thing to say, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I didn't ever learn how to clean a kitchen sink. Right? Like I'm embarrassed that the garbage disposal smells and I don't know how to fix that.
Hmm.
Right? That's a very different feeling that will have a very different response.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's give this imaginary person another benefit of the doubt. When you say your standards are too high and you do the paper plate thing, and then you spend your spare time that you have spent not washing dishes and you do something for yourself, or you sit on the couch or you golf or whatever the hell you're doing, you're putting your interests first
Mm-hmm.
without
Mm-hmm.
consent. In fact,
Yeah.
the opposite of consent.
Yeah.
Someone is asking you to please not do that. And you're like, no, I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
If you were to communicate, one of the values in my life is that I spend time with my friends and I get outside. I really enjoy this hobby a lot. How can I have that need met while also meeting your needs? Let's
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way that everybody can have the things
Mm-hmm.
that they want in this partnership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The things that they want and the things that they need. That's the other thing. Like I'm very interested because I think that in those situations, in situations like with this imaginary, right, this imaginary partnership is, when we stereotype it down to like he doesn't want to participate, she just wants to like, her standards are too high and she just wants to keep the house clean all day or whatever. It's this thing of like, no, this is like very reductive of everybody involved. Like there is an in between where it's
Mhm,
not a role reversal and he's got to, it's not a Freaky Friday situation where he's going to have to clean and do all of the things and she's going to sit down and, play. I don't know. For me, it would still be playing video games, but right. Like it's not a role reversal. It's a meeting of the minds and being like, this isn't working. We've got to sort out what our values are. Because you're exactly right.
mhm,
The It's not that sitting on the couch and playing video games. We don't want to reduce it down to like, what are you doing? Like that's all you're doing. What are you doing? Right? Like I spend my time
video
on my
games are
phone all day.
great.
Well, and I spend time on my phone, like I'm sure looking back on their childhood, they'll be like, my mom was on her phone all the time. I work from my phone and all of my friends live out of state. Right. So
Mhm,
like I am on my phone a lot. It's not like that is part of my social connection. That's part of what fuels me throughout the day. Right. Video games are the same thing. So
mhm,
you're exactly right. Coming together and being like, hey, this is what but that takes vulnerability. That takes curiosity. That takes interest in wanting, in both parties wanting to make sure that the other one has needs met, which again is a
mhm.
really hard, nuanced place to be when you're being told that your standards are too high.
Yeah. Immediate dismissal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not okay.
Well, I think we fixed it. I think we fixed it. We solved it. I'm really glad this
Yeah.
is a long form podcast and that we decided to do this because it's so it's so freaking nuanced, right? It's so freaking nuanced. It's like people come to Fair Play and they're like, "Oh, like I'm really excited to get my household in order," and then they leave and they're like, "Jesus Christ! I feel like Crystal just told us we needed to be in couples therapy like 6 months ago." And it's like, yeah, I mean, probably, but the good news is that you've got all the information now. Like
Right.
you've got all of the, the resources and the information and hopefully a partner who's willing to engage in that work.
Yeah, 100%. It's a tool.
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm. It's a
tool for
tool.
your tool belt.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. Real quick before we say goodbye, can you repeat the steps you were talking about? Was it acknowledge,
Oh yeah, I want
feelings?
to write those down because that was really good if I'm going to go ahead and toot my own horn. Um yeah, it's what did I say? Acknowledging the work that has been done, acknowledging caregiving partner work and the effort that they have done because that's immediately going to like pull down their defenses, right? And cut through that resentment. Recognize what you're lacking and what you're needing and then asking for help in a non-defensive way,
Mhm,
and then maybe like I would say like a follow-up, right? Like anything, and I think you've got this from Daniel Stillman in terms of communication principles, but always wanting to communicate when emotion is low and cognition is high, not when emotion is high, because then cognition is going to be low. So acknowledging, recognizing what you're lacking, asking for help in a non-defensive way, and then requesting a follow-up, right? Saying, I don't need for us to talk about this right this second. Like, we don't have time right now. Could we, giving a specific time, do you have time tonight after dinner to sit down and talk about, like, to work this out with me? So we can maybe write these things down. I could put them on my phone or whatever, right? Or, hey, we have date night on Wednesday. Can we sit and talk about that on Wednesday night? I would really love to address it so that neither one of you is coming from a defensive, place up front.
yeah, I think that's great. I feel like the Gottmans, I just saw a really cool thing that they shared too, and it was just like soften your approach.
Yes. Yep. Yep. It's all about the softened startup, right? The Gottmans call it the softened startup of like coming from a space. It's very different to say, hey, you did this to me, or like, hey, pissed me off, or as opposed to owning your own stuff first of like, hey, my feelings are hurt, right? But it's much more vulnerable. So it's going to feel much more risky, and it's going to feel much more, I mean, the word that we use in our, like when my husband and I are trying to like figure our shit out, I'm always like, that feels dumb. Like it feels stupid to me to be like, hey, my feelings are hurt, right?
Oh
But that's
yeah.
because I learned and internalized, right? Like talking about your feelings is stupid. Like, what are you, dumb? Just like use your logic, right? Think it
Yeah.
through. As opposed to, it feels very vulnerable, and it feels very there's like a shame base in there, right? Or like a pride thing of like,
Yeah.
I have to admit to you that I'm hurting, and that feels weird.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I've worked on, we definitely have defensiveness is so both of us, both of us are very defensive. And I think that we've gotten much better at coming to the table and being like, I want to bring this thing up. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want to start a fight. I'm bringing this up because I want to feel heard, not necessarily to solve the problem right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm coming out of the gates and expressing what I need in this
Mm-hmm.
situation. Sometimes I talk real fast because I'm like, I got to get it. Like,
Yeah, I got to get it out before I change my mind and don't want to talk about it.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just like being, like you said, like being vulnerable about like the intention. The intention here
Mm-hmm.
is I want to be heard. I want to connect over this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I'm definitely I have a hair trigger, something I'm working on. And so there's a lot of that communication ahead of time. If I am feeling elevated, I'm not trying to stop the conversation. I'm noticing something about my body and I'm going to
Yeah.
take a breath. I promise we'll come back to it.
Clear communication is kind, and you have to have that self awareness, right? And that self reflection to be able to say that and to be able to know and notice that. Which is why I posted this week on TikTok about this emotion sensation wheel that I use from a person who is a therapist and also an artist, because we use it in our home, right? Where it's like, okay, what are you feeling in your body? Okay, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling scared? Are you feeling frustrated? Like, let's give it words, because it takes a lot of inner work to do that. It's much
Mm-hmm.
easier. Like, I just want to normalize, because of how neural pathways are created and made, and from our families of origin and what we see, those are our templates. It's usually much easier to just yell at somebody. And that's not because you're lazy or because you like to yell at people. It's because that's like, if that was your template, that was your template. Kids don't learn in a vacuum, right? You
Mm-hmm.
didn't come to that conclusion because it was your favorite conclusion. It takes more energy and effort and space to learn a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not work for one person. That's work for
Yep,
both. Again, shout
absolutely.
out to Rose Hackman, Emotional Labor.
I could just gift that book to every single, like, I'm just like buy them in bulk and just drop them on
You know
people's
what?
driveways.
Let's do a Father's Day giveaway.
We should do that. Absolutely. Let's do that.
Love it.
I'm so down.
If this comes out post Father's Day, I hope you won the book.
I hope you want it. I hope it's blessing your life like it's blessing ours.
All right.
So good.
That was a good one. Thank you so much for sharing that one, Crystal. And thank you so
Yeah.
much to the person who wrote in.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Don't forget to subscribe. We also have a paid subscription right now where we are putting bonus
Mhm.
content and are continuing to record and post that there. It also just really supports what we're doing because this is super fun. It's super
Yes.
fun.
We love doing this.
And all the reviews and all of that has been so awesome. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
We'll see ya.